Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. Neil Crow's boots echoed against crystalline floors as he strode through the grand corridors of the Kalian Palace. The perpetual twilight of the alien world filtered through towering windows, casting prismatic shadows that danced across his dark uniform. Guards with iridescent armor flanked him, their movements fluid yet precise. He had imagined this moment countless times during the long journey from Earth, facing the infamous Queen Ariana. Now, approaching the massive doors to her court, his heart thundered against his ribs, not from fear, but from the raw intensity of purpose that had driven him across the stars. The doors swung open silently, revealing a scene that made him pause mid-stride. The royal court was nothing like the war rooms and sterile diplomatic chambers he knew. Elegant gaming tables of polished crystal dominated the space, each surrounded by alien diplomats engaged in complex games of chance and strategy. The air hummed with tension and excitement, punctuated by the soft click of dice and subtle movements of game pieces. And there, at the center of it all, was Queen Ariana. She reclined on a throne that seemed to grow from the crystalline floor itself, her emerald skin luminescent in the twilight. Her crown pulsed with an inner light that matched her heartbeat, casting an ethereal glow across features that were both alien and breathtaking. The curves of her body, draped in flowing silver fabric, were undeniably human-like, yet there was something otherworldly in her grace that made his throat go dry. Their eyes met across the chamber, her lips curved into a smile that held secrets. "Commander Crow," she called out, her voice musical and slightly amused. "Welcome to my little game room. I trust your journey was enlightening?" Neil approached, keeping his expression neutral despite the way his skin prickled under her gaze. "Your Majesty, I come representing Earth's interests in—" "Oh, spare me the formal declarations." She waved a delicate hand, the gesture somehow both dismissive and elegant. "We both know why you're here. The question is—" She leaned forward and the crown's light seemed to intensify. "Are you prepared to play by our rules?" "I don't play games, Your Majesty." Her laugh was like crystal chimes in the wind. "Everyone plays games, Commander. The only difference is whether they admit it." She rose from her throne with fluid grace, descending the steps toward him. "Your Earth colony needs protection. My people face threats you can't imagine. Perhaps we can help each other." Neil fought to keep his eyes on her face as she circled him. Her presence was intoxicating, a blend of power and sensuality that made his tactical training seem inadequate. "And what exactly are you proposing?" Ariana stopped before a small table that seemed to materialize from the floor. On its surface lay a set of dice that gleamed like captured starlight. A simple game, ancient dice carved from meteor crystals. The stakes? Her eyes locked with his. "Everything." "You expect me to gamble with the fate of an Earth colony?" "I expect you to recognize an opportunity, Commander." She picked up one of the dice, rolling it between her fingers. "If you win, my kingdom, including its protection, belongs to Earth. If I win—" Her smile turned predatory. "Well, let's just say you'll be staying with us for quite some time." Neil studied the dice, then her face, searching for the trap he knew must exist. "And why would you risk your entire kingdom on a game of chance?" "Perhaps I'm feeling generous." She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her exotic perfume. "Or perhaps I see something in you worth gambling for." Around them, the other games had ceased. Alien diplomats watched with barely concealed interest as their queen circled the human commander like a predator assessing its prey. But Neil saw something in their eyes. Fear? Anticipation? There was more happening here than a simple game of chance. Your reputation precedes you, Commander, Ariana continued, her voice dropping to an intimate murmur. The man who never gambles, never compromises, so righteous. She traced a finger along the edge of the gaming table. And yet, here you are, in my court, considering my offer. Neil's jaw tightened. I'm here because Earth ordered me to be. Are you? She raised an eyebrow, the gesture making her look startlingly human despite her exotic beauty. Or are you here because of what happened to your family? His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist before she could withdraw it from the table. The room went deadly silent. Guards stepped forward, but Ariana held up her free hand, stopping them. Her skin was cool under his fingers, smooth like polished jade. How do you know about that? He growled. She didn't try to pull away. Instead, she stepped closer until they were almost touching. I know many things, Commander, including who was really responsible for their deaths. Neil released her wrist as if burned. His mind raced. Could she know about Calder? About the real reason he'd accepted this mission? Sit, she commanded, gesturing to the chair across from her. Let us play. Unless you're afraid. He searched her face, trying to read past that enigmatic smile. What are the rules? Simple enough. She settled into her chair with feline grace. 3 rolls each. Highest total wins. But she held up a finger. Each roll must be accompanied by a truth, lie, and you forfeit everything. A truth game? Really? All games are truth games, Commander. Some of us are just more honest about it. She picked up the dice, their crystalline surfaces catching the light. Shall I begin? Neil sat, his posture rigid. By all means. She rolled the dice across the table's smooth surface. They landed with an oddly musical chime. 8, she announced. And my truth. I already know you're going to accept my challenge, even though every instinct is screaming at you not to. He grimaced. She wasn't wrong. My turn. He grabbed the dice, their surface unnaturally warm against his palm. They clattered across the table. 7. And my truth. I don't trust you. Her laugh was genuine this time. Oh, Commander, that's not a truth. That's obvious. Try again. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Fine. I've dreamed about meeting you. About what you'd look like. You're not what I expected. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise. Interest? She recovered quickly, taking the dice for her second roll. 10. And my truth. I arranged for you specifically to be sent here. That caught him off guard. Why? She teased. 1 truth per roll. Your turn. Neil rolled. 9. And I think you're hiding something about the threats to your people. This isn't just about protection. Very good, Commander. She fingered the dice thoughtfully. Final roll. This is where it gets interesting. The dice tumbled from her hands. 3. And my last truth. I'm going to lose this game on purpose. The words hung in the air between them. Neil stared at her, trying to understand. Why tell me that? Roll, Commander. Make it count. His hands weren't quite steady as he picked up the dice for the last time. They felt heavier somehow, charged with possibility. The room held its breath as they rolled across the table. 12, he announced, his voice hollow. Perfect score. And your truth? He met her gaze. I think you're the most dangerous person I've ever met. Ariana smiled and stood, removing her crown with deliberate slowness. The pulsing light within it dimmed but didn't die completely. By the ancient laws of Kalian, I surrender my crown and kingdom to the victor. She placed it on the table between them. I am now your prisoner, Commander Crow. The alien diplomats erupted in shocked whispers. Neil rose slowly, picking up the crown. It thrummed with power in his hands. This was too easy. Perhaps. She stepped around the table, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her body. Or perhaps the game is just beginning. Her smile held secrets and promises and danger all at once. Shall we discuss the terms of my captivity? The private chamber where they retreated was a stark contrast to the gaming hall, intimate, with walls of living crystal that seemed to breathe with the planet's pulse. Neil placed the crown on a floating pedestal, its glow casting strange shadows across their faces. "You realize," he said, watching Ariana pour 2 glasses of iridescent liquid, "that by Earth's laws, I should arrest you immediately. And yet you haven't." She offered him a glass. "Perhaps because you realize there's more at stake than just politics?" He accepted the drink but didn't taste it. "Why did you really lose on purpose?" "Straight to the point." She sipped her drink, settling onto a crystalline couch. "Your Earth colony needs protection. My people face extinction. But the real threat—" She paused, studying the liquid in her glass. "The real threat comes from within." "Calder," Neil said quietly. Her head snapped up. "You know?" "I suspected. He was my mentor before he betrayed Earth." Neil's fingers tightened on his glass. "He's the one who killed my family. And now he wants my crown." Ariana gestured to the artifact. "Or rather, what's inside it. An ancient power source that keeps our world stable. Without it—" She shrugged elegantly. "Well, let's just say extinction would be the kindest outcome. So you lost the game to put the crown under Earth's protection." "Partially." She rose, moving to stand before him. "I also lost because I needed to get close to you. As your prisoner, I'll have access to Earth's resources, your military intelligence." Her hand touched his chest, light as a feather. "And to you." Neil caught her wrist but didn't push her away. "You're playing a dangerous game." "I'm always playing games, Commander." Her eyes met his, challenging. "The question is, are you willing to play with me?" Before he could respond, the chamber's crystals pulsed red. An alarm screamed through the palace. "What's happening?" Neil demanded. Ariana's face went pale. "It started! Calder! He's making his move." She lunged for the crown, but Neil was faster, snatching it away. "Not so fast, Your Majesty." "You fool!" she hissed. "If he gets control of the artifact—" The chamber shook. Through the windows they could see ships descending through Kalian's twilight sky, ships bearing Earth military markings, but moving with decidedly un-Earth-like precision. "He's using Earth vessels," Neil realized. "He's going to make it look like we're invading." "Then we have no choice." Ariana stepped close, her body pressing against his. "We have to work together. Trust me." "Trust you?" He laughed bitterly. "You just admitted to manipulating this entire situation." "Yes," she said simply, "to save both our peoples." Her hand cupped his cheek, her touch electric. "Sometimes the biggest gambles require the deepest trust." Another explosion rocked the palace. Neil made his decision, grabbing her hand. "Fine, but we play by my rules now." Her smile was both dangerous and delighted. "Lead the way, Commander." They ran from the chamber together, the crown clutched in Neil's free hand, its light pulsing in time with their racing hearts. Behind them, the crystalline walls of the palace began to crack as Calder's forces opened fire. The game had changed, but one thing was certain. They were both now playing for much higher stakes than either had planned. The escape pod shuddered as it broke through Kalian's atmosphere. Neil gripped the controls tighter, stealing a glance at Ariana in the co-pilot's seat. She sat rigidly, eyes fixed on her world falling away below them, her emerald skin ghostly in the pod's dim emergency lighting. "Your people will be safe," he said, though the words felt hollow even to him. "The evacuation protocols. Save your comfort, Commander." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "I know exactly what I've done." The Crown sat between them in a sealed containment unit, its pulse growing fainter as they left the planet's surface. 3 of Calder's ships pursued them, their weapons systems charging. "They're closing fast," Ariana announced, her fingers dancing over the control panel. "Your Earth military training didn't account for Kalian ship tactics, I assume?" Neil allowed himself a grim smile. "You'd be surprised what I picked up during the border wars." He yanked the controls hard, sending them into a spiral that made the pod's structure groan. Energy blasts streaked past them, lighting up the cockpit. "Impressive," Ariana conceded, "but not good enough." She reached across him, her body pressing against his as she accessed a hidden panel. The scent of her, something like star flowers and ozone, made his head swim. "Allow me." The pod's engines shifted tone, and suddenly they were moving in ways that should have been impossible. Neil watched in amazement as she piloted them through a series of maneuvers that left their pursuers firing at empty space. "Where did you learn to fly like that?" "I wasn't always a queen." Her smile held a hint of mischief despite their situation. "Before the Crown, I had different responsibilities." A warning light flashed. One of Calder's ships had locked onto them. "Hold on," Ariana commanded. She pressed herself closer, reaching for another control, and Neil found himself acutely aware of every curve of her body against his. The pod dropped into a dive that plastered them together, then shot through a gap in Kalian's orbital defense grid that shouldn't have existed. They emerged into open space, the pursuing ships trapped behind the grid's reactivated shields. "That," Neil said when he could breathe again, "was either brilliant or insane." "In my experience, the best plans are usually both." She withdrew to her seat, but the ghost of her touch lingered on his skin. "Your ship is in range. The Starweaver, yes?" He nodded, already signaling for emergency docking. "How did you know its name?" "I told you, Commander. I arranged for you specifically." She turned to face him fully. "I studied everything about you, your service record, your tactics, your tragedy." The mention of his past made his jaw clench. "And what did all that studying tell you about me?" "That you're a man of honor, that you'll do anything to protect those in your care." Her eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "That you're carrying a weight no one should have to bear alone." The pod's comm crackled with the Starweaver's response. "Emergency docking approved." "We're about to find out if your assessment was correct," Neil said as they approached the larger ship. "Because once we're aboard, my crew will expect me to throw you in the brig." "But you won't." It wasn't a question. "No," he admitted. "I won't. God help me, I actually believe you about Calder, which means we need to work together." "Trust and necessity," Ariana mused. "Such a dangerous combination." The pod locked into the Starweaver's docking bay with a metallic clang. Neil could already hear his crew assembling outside. "Ready to meet my people, Your Majesty?" She lifted her chin, every inch a queen despite her technically being his prisoner. "Lead the way, Commander. Just remember, the Crown stays with me at all times." "Wouldn't have it any other way." He hit the pod's door release. "Welcome to your new home." The Starweaver's crew stared openly as Neil escorted Ariana through the corridors. He couldn't blame them. She moved like liquid grace given form, her presence commanding attention despite her status as a prisoner. "Your ship is functional," she observed, running a finger along a metal wall. "Though it lacks the aesthetic touch of Kalian design. We prefer reliability over beauty." "The two aren't mutually exclusive, Commander." She cast him a sidelong glance that made his pulse quicken, "as I'm sure you're beginning to realize." They reached his private quarters, the only space secure enough to house someone of her importance. The door slid open to reveal sparse but comfortable accommodations. "Home sweet home," Neil said, gesturing her inside. at least until we reach Earth." Ariana surveyed the room, her gaze lingering on the single bed. "How intimate. I'll sleep in my office. How gallant." She set the Crown's containment unit on a desk, then turned to face him. "But perhaps we should discuss the real reason you're keeping me close." "You mean besides preventing you from taking control of my ship?" Her laugh was rich and genuine. "If I wanted your ship, Commander, I would have taken it the moment we docked." She stepped closer. "No, you keep me here because you know that together we're the only ones who can stop Calder." Before he could respond, the ship's alarms blared. Red emergency lights bathed the room in crimson. "Speaking of Calder," Ariana murmured. Neil hit the comm. "Bridge, report." "3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace, sir," his first officer responded. They're Earth vessels, but they're not responding to recognition codes." "Calder," Neil growled. "How did he find us so quickly?" Ariana's face went pale. "The Crown. It's not just a power source, it's a beacon." She rushed to the containment unit. "He's tracking its energy signature. Can you shut it down?" "Not without risking the stability of my entire planet." Her fingers traced the Crown's pulsing surface. "But I can mask it. I'll need your help." "What kind of help?" She met his eyes. "The kind that requires complete trust." The ship shuddered under enemy fire. Neil made his decision. "Tell me what you need." "Physical contact. The Crown responds to biological signatures. Together, we might be able to dampen its output." He stepped forward and she took his hands, placing them on the Crown alongside hers. The artifact's light intensified, warming under their touch. Ariana pressed closer, her body aligning with his. "Focus," she whispered, her breath warm against his neck. "Feel the energy flow, like this." Something electric passed between them. The Crown's pulse synchronized with their heartbeats, then began to fade. Neil found himself hyper-aware of every point where their bodies touched, of the subtle tremor in Ariana's hands beneath his. "It's working," she breathed. "But we need to maintain contact until we're sure Calder's lost our trail." Another blast rocked the ship. Neil stumbled, instinctively pulling Ariana against him to keep her steady. She gasped softly, her hands gripping his shoulders. "Sorry," he muttered. "Don't be." Her eyes met his, filled with an intensity that made his throat go dry. "You're doing exactly what needs to be done." The comm crackled. "Commander, the enemy ships are breaking off pursuit. They're leaving." Relief flooded through him, but he didn't step away. Ariana's presence was intoxicating, her skin cool against his, her eyes holding secrets he suddenly desperately wanted to uncover. "We should probably let go of the Crown now," he said roughly. "Probably." She didn't move. "Unless you're enjoying this as much as I am. You're dangerous." "Yes." Her smile was wicked. "But then, so are you." The next few days aboard the Star Weaver settled into an uneasy routine. Neil kept Ariana under close supervision, but their forced proximity began to reveal layers to both of them that neither had expected. One evening, he found her studying star charts in his quarters, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Looking for escape routes?" he asked, setting down a tray of food. "Planning our next move." She glanced up, a hint of surprise crossing her features at the sight of the meal. "You brought dinner. You haven't eaten all day." "Keeping track of my habits, Commander. It's my job." He sat across from her. "Though I suspect you're making my job harder than necessary." Ariana picked up something that resembled an earth apple, examining it with curiosity. "How so?" "You're not acting like a prisoner or a queen in exile. You're too comfortable." "Would you prefer I rage against my captivity?" She took a delicate bite of the fruit. "Throw myself against the walls in despair? I'd prefer the truth." She set the fruit down, her playful demeanor fading. The truth? Very well. Her eyes met his. Every moment we spend heading to Earth is another moment Calder has to consolidate his power. My people are scattered, vulnerable. And this, she gestured to the crown, still pulsing softly in its containment unit, is both their salvation and their doom. Explain. The artifact within the crown doesn't just power our world, Commander. It's connected to every Kalian on a genetic level. Without its influence, my people will begin to fade. Neil leaned forward. Fade how? Our biology requires the artifact's energy to maintain stability. Without it, she swallowed hard, we become something less, something broken. But you seem fine. For now, as long as I'm near the crown. Her laugh was bitter. Another reason to keep me close, perhaps? The implications hit him. You knew this would happen when you made the wager. You sacrificed yourself to save them. I sacrificed everything. Her voice cracked slightly. My crown, my people, my future. All to stop Calder from using the artifact's power for his own ends. Without thinking, Neil reached across the table, taking her hand. Her skin was cooler than before, he realized, already showing signs of the separation she'd described. We'll find a way, he said softly, to stop Calder and save your people. Will we? She didn't pull her hand away. And what about your mission? Your duty to Earth? Some things are more important than duty. Her fingers intertwined with his. Dangerous words, Commander. Neil, he corrected. After everything, you might as well use my name. Neil. She tested the word, making it sound like poetry. And what should I be to you? Still your prisoner? He started to respond, but a violent tremor rocked the ship. Warning klaxons screamed to life. They both jumped to their feet. Bridge! Neil barked into the comm. Status! Static answered. Then a familiar voice filled the room, but it wasn't from the comm. Hello, old friend. Neil's blood ran cold. Calder's image materialized in the center of the room, a hologram, but perfectly clear. Took me a while to hack your systems, the hologram continued. But then you always were predictable, Neil, taking the noble queen prisoner. So very by the book. What do you want, Calder? Just to deliver a message and a choice. The hologram turned to Ariana. Your Majesty, your crown's artifact is already affecting your people. I can feel them dying, scattered across the galaxy, but I can save them. All you have to do is surrender it to me. Never, she spat. No? Calder smiled. Then watch. The hologram expanded, showing images from across Kalian space. Ariana's people, clutching their chests, their green skin turning gray and lifeless. Stop, she cried. Please. You know what you have to do. The hologram flickered. Oh, and Neil, your family sends their regards. The transmission cut off. Ariana staggered and Neil caught her before she could fall. He's killing them, she whispered against his chest. My people. I can feel them dying. The crown's light began to pulse erratically. Energy crackled around it, filling the room with an otherworldly hum. What's happening? The artifact. Ariana pulled away, stumbling toward the containment unit. It's responding to their pain, to mine. She reached for the crown. I have to. Ariana, don't! But she had already grasped it. Light exploded through the room as the crown reconnected with its queen. Neil shielded his eyes, feeling raw power wash over him in waves. When the light faded, Ariana stood transformed. Her skin glowed with renewed vigor, but tears streaked her face. I understand now, she said softly. What must be done? What are you talking about? To save my people, I must never return to them. She turned to him, crown blazing. The artifact's power. It's too much for any one person to control, even me, especially me. There has to be another way. There isn't. She stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face. I'm sorry, Neil, for involving you in this, for making you care. Ariana. But mostly, she continued, I'm sorry for this. Before he could react, she pressed her lips to his. The kiss was electric, passionate, and heartbreaking all at once. Then darkness claimed him as she activated some hidden Kalian technology, and he collapsed into unconsciousness. The last thing he saw was her sad smile as she whispered, Goodbye, my commander. Neil woke to chaos. His head pounded as he pushed himself up from the floor, memories flooding back. Ariana! He stumbled to his feet, but the room was empty. The Crown's containment unit lay shattered, its contents gone. Bridge, locate the Kalian Queen. Sir! His first officer's voice was urgent. She's in the engine room. She's doing something to the power core. Neil ran, his boots thundering against metal decking. Crew members flattened themselves against walls as he passed, the ship's emergency lights casting everything in crimson shadows. He found her surrounded by crackling energy, the crown floating above her head as she interfaced with the ship's systems. Her emerald skin glowed with an inner light that made her look almost divine. Stop! He shouted over the roar of power. Whatever you're doing, stop! I can't. She didn't turn around. This is the only way to save everyone. By killing yourself? By removing myself from the equation. Her hands danced over control panels, redirecting power flows. The Crown's artifact responds to Kalian biology. As long as I'm near my people, it will try to maintain our connection. But that connection is what Calder wants to exploit. So you're running away. He moved closer, fighting against the energy field surrounding her. That's not the Queen I know. The Queen you know is a facade. Her voice cracked. I've spent my life playing games, manipulating others, all in the name of duty. But this... She finally turned to face him, and the pain in her eyes made his heart clench. This isn't a game anymore. The ship shuddered as she initiated some sequence in the power core. Warning klaxon screamed, What are you doing? Creating a quantum barrier. Her fingers trembled as they moved across the controls. Once it's established, I'll never be able to return to Kalian space. The artifact's power will stabilize, protecting my people, but I'll be cut off from them forever. There has to be another way. There isn't. Energy crackled between them as he reached for her. Calder proved that. As long as I exist near my people, they're vulnerable. The Crown's power is too great, too tempting. The quantum barrier began to form, a shimmering wall of possibility and impossibility intertwined. Neil could feel reality itself bending around them. Then let me help you, he pleaded. We can find a solution together. Oh, my dear commander, she smiled sadly. You already have helped. You showed me what real honor looks like, what it means to sacrifice everything for those you protect. Her hand reached out, almost touching his face but stopping just short. I think I could have loved you in another life. The barrier surged, nearly complete. Soon it would be irreversible. Ariana, please. Take care of them for me, she whispered. My people, they'll need guidance in this new era. I won't let you do this alone. You don't have a choice. She raised her hand and he felt himself being pushed back by an invisible force. The last thing he saw was her face, tears streaming down her emerald cheeks as the quantum barrier sealed, cutting her off from everything she'd ever known. The engine room exploded into light, then darkness. When Neil's vision cleared, she was gone. The Crown lay on the deck, its light pulsing weakly like a heartbeat growing ever fainter. His comm crackled. Commander! Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. It's the Kalian fleet, sir. They're alive. Their life signs are stabilizing. Neil picked up the crown, feeling its diminished power. She'd done it, saved her people by exiling herself from them forever. "Your Majesty," he whispered to the empty room, "the game isn't over yet." In the distance, Calder's ships appeared on their sensors, but something had changed. Without access to the crown's full power, without Ariana's presence to activate its potential, his advantage was gone. But so was she. Neil clutched the crown tighter, feeling its pulse align with his heartbeat. Somewhere beyond the quantum barrier, Ariana was alone, cut off from everything she loved. He had a choice to make: follow his duty to Earth, or find a way to break through the impossible and bring her home. The crown's light flickered, as if in response to his thoughts. "Well," he said softly, "you did say the best plans are both brilliant and insane." 6 hours after Ariana's disappearance, Earth's orbital defense grid detected an anomaly. Neil stood on the Starweaver's bridge, the crown humming softly in its makeshift containment field beside him as the sensor readings poured in. "That's impossible," his science officer muttered. "The energy signature. It's exactly like the crown's, but magnified 1,000 times." "Not impossible." Neil's jaw clenched. Calder. The main view screen showed a tear in space itself, a wound in reality that pulsed with familiar power. Through it emerged a ship unlike anything Earth had ever seen, a fusion of human and Kalian technology, wrapped in tendrils of the same energy that powered the crown. "Incoming transmission," the comm officer announced. Calder's face filled the screen, but he'd changed. Energy coursed across his skin in patterns that mimicked the crown's pulse. "Hello, Neil. Missing something?" His smile was wrong, stretched too wide. "Or should I say, someone? What have you done?" "Simply claimed what was always meant to be mine." Calder gestured, and the view widened to show his ship's bridge. "You see, while you were playing prisoner and warden with our lovely queen, I was learning the crown's true secrets. Did you know there are others? Ancient artifacts scattered across the galaxy, waiting to be awakened?" Neil's hand moved to the crown beside him. It thrummed faster, as if responding to its sibling's presence. "Where is she?" "Your queen? Oh, that's the best part." Calder laughed, the sound distorted by power. "She trapped herself beyond my reach. Very clever. But in doing so, she left Earth defenseless. No one to stop me from claiming this world as I claimed the others." The crown's pulse quickened. Neil felt its energy reaching for him, trying to communicate something. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "She didn't leave Earth defenseless. She left it with me." "You?" Calder's amusement turned to rage. "You're nothing, a soldier who couldn't even protect his own family. What can you possibly—" The transmission cut off as Neil grabbed the crown. Power surged through him, different from when he'd touched it with Ariana, but no less intense. The artifact recognized him, accepted him. "Sir!" His tactical officer's voice was panicked. "Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. They're Kalian vessels." "Survivors," Neil realized. "The ones who escaped Calder's purge." The crown's energy wrapped around him like an embrace. He could feel its purpose now, understand why Ariana had chosen him. The artifact didn't need a Kalian to function. It needed someone willing to sacrifice everything to protect others, just like she had. "Orders, sir?" Neil straightened, feeling the crown's power align with his own determination. "Contact the Kalian ships. Tell them their queen's champion requests their aid." The bridge crew stared at him. The crown pulsed once, bright and true, and in that moment he swore he felt Ariana's presence, reaching across the quantum barrier, guiding his next words. "And get me a secure channel to Earth Command. It's time they learned what we're really fighting for." The battle for Earth began in fire and light. Calder's ship, powered by stolen artifacts, tore through the orbital defense grid like paper. The Star Weaver and its Kalian allies engaged in desperate hit-and-run attacks, trying to find a weakness in his enhanced shields. "This isn't working," Neil growled from his command chair. The crown sat on his brow now, its energy feeding directly into the ship's systems. "We need to get closer." "Closer?" His first officer gaped. "Sir, his weapons would tear us apart." "Not if we use what he taught me." Neil's fingers danced across his control panel. "Calder was my mentor. He showed me every trick he knew, including how to hide in plain sight." The Star Weaver's engines shifted tone as Neil implemented maneuvers he hadn't used since his training days. The ship slipped between energy blasts, using Calder's own attack patterns against him. "Sir!" The science officer's console lit up. "I'm detecting a quantum fluctuation, similar to the barrier that took her away," Neil finished. The crown's pulse quickened. "Show me." The tactical display revealed a familiar shimmer in space, just behind Calder's vessel, a weak point between realities, created by the interaction of multiple artifacts. "She knew," Neil whispered. "She knew he'd try this, that the artifacts would create." A violent explosion rocked the ship. Warning klaxons screamed as hull breaches opened across multiple decks. "Direct hit!" someone shouted. "We're losing power!" The crown's energy surged through Neil, steadying him. In his mind, he heard Ariana's voice as clearly as if she stood beside him. "Sometimes the biggest gambles require the deepest trust." "All power to forward shields," he commanded. "Set course directly for that quantum fluctuation." "Sir, that's suicide." "No." He gripped his chair as the ship accelerated. "That's how we win." Calder's face appeared on the view screen, his expression twisted with triumph. Poor Neil. Still trying to be the hero? "You couldn't save your family. You couldn't save your queen. What makes you think—" "You're right," Neil interrupted. "I couldn't save them, but that's not what this is about." The Star Weaver plunged toward the quantum fluctuation, its hull groaning under the strain. Calder's ship fired desperately, realizing too late what was happening. "This is about trust," Neil continued, "something you never understood." The crown blazed with light as they hit the fluctuation. Reality twisted, stretched, then shattered around them. Through the breach, Neil saw her, Ariana, suspended in a realm between spaces, her emerald skin glowing with power. Their eyes met across the impossible distance. She smiled. "Now," they said in unison. The crown's energy exploded outward, combining with Ariana's power from beyond the barrier. The artifacts Calder had stolen resonated in response, overloading his ship's systems. "No!" Calder screamed. "The power is mine! I control!" His transmission dissolved into static as his ship began to break apart. The artifact's energy, no longer contained, reached for its rightful wielders. In the chaos, Neil felt the quantum barrier weaken. Just enough. Just for a moment. "Hold on," he whispered to his crew. Then louder, "Ariana, take my hand." Through the quantum rift, their hands clasped. The sensation was electric, both familiar and entirely new. Neil pulled, feeling reality itself resist as he drew Ariana across the barrier that had separated them. "You're insane," she gasped as she materialized on the Star Weaver's bridge. "Breaking quantum barriers, wearing my crown, challenging Calder directly. I learned from the best." He steadied her as she stumbled, pulling her close. "A queen once told me the best plans are both brilliant and insane." Around them, Calder's ship continued to break apart, but amid the destruction, a figure materialized on their bridge, Calder himself, his body crackling with stolen power. "How touching!" His voice resonated unnaturally. The noble commander and his alien queen, reunited at last. But you still don't understand, do you? Why I did all this? Then enlighten us, Ariana challenged, her hand finding Neil's. Power? Control? Neil's voice was hard. The same things you always wanted? No! Calder's laugh was bitter. Connection. True connection. His form flickered as the artifact's energy coursed through him. You lost your family, Neil. I lost everything in the border wars. But these artifacts, they offer more than just power. They offer unity, perfect understanding between species, between worlds. At what cost? Ariana stepped forward, forcing that connection, destroying free will. Better than the lies we tell ourselves, the games we play. Calder's eyes blazed. Your people built their entire society on manipulation and chance. Humans wage wars while pretending to seek peace, but the artifacts can make us all one. No more loss, no more separation. The crown pulsed on Neil's brow, and suddenly he understood. You wanted to save us, all of us, from pain, from loss. His voice softened. From ourselves. Yes, finally, you see. But you're wrong, Ariana interrupted. True connection can't be forced. It has to be chosen. She reached for the crown on Neil's head. Like this. As her fingers touched the artifact, its energy flowed between them. Not the raw power Calder wielded, but something deeper. Memories, feelings, understanding passed between them in an instant. This is real connection, Neil said quietly. Built on trust, on choice. On love, Ariana added, her eyes meeting his. Calder screamed as the artifact's power turned on him, his forced connection shattering under the weight of genuine unity. You can't. It's not. I was trying to save. We know, Neil said, and we're sorry. The stolen artifact's energy exploded outward, then collapsed in on itself, taking Calder with it. In the silence that followed, Neil and Ariana stood together, the crown's light soft between them. You came for me, she whispered. Always. Her legs buckled then, the strain of crossing the quantum barrier finally taking its toll. Before she could fall, Neil swept her into his arms. I can walk, she protested, but her arms wound around his neck. I know. He held her closer. But I'm never letting you go again. She laughed softly against his neck. My noble commander, always so dramatic. Says the queen who trapped herself beyond space and time. Touché. She nestled against him as he carried her from the bridge. Where are you taking me? Home, he said simply. Both our homes. It's time to build something new, together. No more games? Oh, I wouldn't say that. He smiled down at her. But this time, we make the rules. The crown's light enveloped them both as he carried her through the corridors of the Star Weaver, its pulse matching the rhythm of their hearts. Behind them, Earth and Kalian ships began coordinating cleanup efforts, two peoples working together in the aftermath of crisis. Neil, she murmured as they reached his quarters. I did mean it, you know, what I said before, about loving you. He set her down gently on the bed but didn't release her. I know. His hand cupped her cheek. I love you too, Your Majesty. Ariana, she corrected. Just Ariana. Their lips met as the crown's light bathed them in gentle radiance, a blessing from the ancient power that had brought them together. Outside, the stars shone on a new beginning, one where games of chance gave way to choices of the heart. 1 year later, Kalian Royal Palace. Crystal spires caught the perpetual twilight, casting prismatic shadows across the renewed palace grounds. The gaming tables remained, but they no longer hosted battles of political survival. Instead, laughter echoed through the halls as Earth diplomats and Kalian nobles shared stories over friendly matches. In the royal chambers, Ariana stood before a mirror, adjusting her crown, no longer just a vessel of power, but a symbol of unity between worlds. The artifact within it pulsed contentedly, its energy now freely shared between Earth and Kalian through a network of carefully monitored quantum relays. Still preening? Neil's reflection appeared behind her, his Earth military uniform modified with Kalian crystalline accents. "A queen must maintain appearances," she teased, turning to face him, "even if she's only queen of half a kingdom now." "Co-ruler," he corrected, pulling her close. The council was very specific about that terminology. The joint Earth-Kalian Council had formed in the months after Calder's defeat. They'd discovered his research, his desperate attempts to recreate the connection he'd lost in the border wars. In the end, his notes had helped them understand the artifacts better, leading to breakthroughs in interspecies cooperation. "Speaking of the Council," Ariana said, "they've approved the expansion of the cultural exchange program. More humans wanting to learn our games, more Kalians studying Earth's diplomatic methods. And the quantum barriers? Stable. My people can travel freely now, no risk of biological degradation." She traced the crystalline patterns on his uniform. "Though some of us prefer to stay right where we are." Neil caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Ready to face the crowds? It's not every day we celebrate a year of actual peace." "Almost." She reached for a small box on her dressing table. "But first." Inside lay a pair of dice, carved from the same meteor crystal as the ones they'd used in their first game. "Feeling nostalgic?" Neil asked. "Feeling grateful?" She placed them in his hand. "One roll for old time's sake?" "What are the stakes?" Her smile turned mischievous. "If I win, you have to dance with me at the celebration, in front of everyone. And if I win, then I have to dance with you." He laughed, pulling her closer. "Quite the gamble, Your Majesty." "The best ones always are." She kissed him softly. "But you know what I've learned?" "What's that?" "Sometimes you don't need to roll the dice at all." Her eyes met his, full of love and promise. "Sometimes you just know." Outside their chambers, the celebration began. Earth music mixed with Kalian harmonies, creating something entirely new. The dice lay forgotten on the table as Neil led Ariana to the dance floor, their steps perfectly matched, their hearts beating in time with the crown's gentle pulse. On a distant quantum frequency, the artifacts hummed together, no longer tools of power but bridges between worlds. And in the endless twilight of Kalian, two people who had started as opponents danced together, proving that the greatest victories come not from games of chance, but from choosing love. The end. In the secure archives of both Earth and Kalian, a final note was added to the official record. The Crow-Ariana Accords marked the beginning of true partnership between our peoples. But historians would later note that the real change began with a game of dice, a quantum barrier, and two leaders who dared to trust in something greater than power. Their legacy continues in every shared game, every diplomatic exchange, and every story told of how love conquered the space between stars. From the Joint Historical Archives, Earth Kalian Cultural Center, 2257 Author's Reflection, Beyond the Quantum Veil. Dear reader, in the perpetual twilight between stars, where games of chance meet matters of the heart, I found this story waiting to be told. Like the ancient artifacts that pulse through its pages, it seemed to resonate with something deeper than mere words could convey. Perhaps you, too, felt the quantum connection as you witnessed Neil and Ariana's journey, that moment when duty transforms into destiny, when the barriers we build around our hearts shatter like crystal in the face of genuine understanding. Some might say this is simply a tale of a soldier and a queen, of politics and power plays across the stars. But between the lines, in the spaces where Earth meets Kalian twilight, lies a truth we all seek, that the greatest games we play are not for kingdoms or crowns, but for the chance to find someone who sees us as we truly are. As you close these pages, know that somewhere in the vast expanse of possibility, a green-skinned queen still dances with her Earth commander, proving that love needs no translation, even across the stars. Their game continues, as does ours. In every choice we make, every barrier we dare to cross, every moment we choose trust over fear. After all, as a wise queen once said, sometimes you don't need to roll the dice at all. Sometimes you just know. May your own stars align as perfectly as theirs. With cosmic gratitude, your storyteller. Written from the observatory tower of the Earth Kalian Cultural Center, where the perpetual twilight still holds secrets waiting to be discovered.